All right, my friends, welcome to your next assignment. Okay, so I'm saying this is remixed because it's sort of like the first assignment, and I wanted to sort of with this class have this idea of 5 quizzes that are related to chapter content, and then these 2 assignments. And you already did the Giants of Psychology, which I'm starting to get into marking, and are awesome. And so I know that you're probably wanting feedback on that before you start the second one. So what I'm going to say is you have some time to do this. And what I would suggest is while you're waiting for me to get back to you on the first one, maybe pick your topic and start finding your information and stuff like that. And then you can kind of see my comment maybe before you start doing it or however makes sense for you time-wise. So in developmental psychology is a discipline with deep roots in the history of psychological thought. And in the first exercise, you picked a psychologist and went deep on them, giants of psychology. In this assignment, I want you to explore a concept from the broader discipline of psychology. And I want you to look at it from this angle of how does this concept have relevance in 2021? Why should people care? Okay, so I want you to pick any of these variety of ideas, okay? So, and if you're having trouble finding information, you can reach out to me, but all of these are things that even a quick Google search will find you tons of information. You can look at the idea of confirmation bias and this issue between sensation and perception. You could look at Wilhelm Wundt and his idea of introspection, fascinating idea. You could look at the idea of automaticity. Yeah. So like this idea of like, how do we automaticize things? How do things become automatic? Right, you could look at Piaget's idea of Socratic questioning, or I'm just going down the first row, or Ross's idea of the false consensus, right? When a bunch of people are being quiet about something and only people on one side are being loud about it, it makes everyone think that everyone thinks what the loud group saying when maybe a huge group doesn't. You could look at the Big Five personality model. You could look at this idea of 4 categories of questions. This is Tinbergen's work. You could look at Harlow and his experiment on love, right, which is called his surrogate mother experiment, the cloth doll. We've touched on, but not went deep into. So there's still a lot of room of how you can speak to how it's meaningful today, especially in a scenario where people are so isolated. You could look at Licklider's idea of developmental systems approach, that certain systems, right, like, well, just kind of think of what the idea of a developmental system would be. This complex system of influences, system of developmental conditionings, this idea of the elaboration likelihood method or model, right? So elaboration likelihood means like how likely is somebody can actually think through it, right? So if you're going to buy popcorn at the movie theater and one's called regular popcorn and one's called supreme popcorn, and it just has a cooler package and you're like, oh, I'll take the supreme popcorn, it's like $1 more, it looks a bit cooler, it's like you're not likely to go deep into thought about it. And if I'm marketing to you, I want to know how deep into thought you're going to go about the product. If you're picking between 2 tractors, first of all, you're somebody that has a mechanical mind. Second of all, you're going to care about things like the horsepower of the engine, or like the wheel size, and like then you're going to have to be much more detailed. So how you pitch things to people is dependent on how much you think they're going to actually think deeply about it. Or are they just going to surface process it? Because if they're just going to surface process it, you mark very differently to them. Here's a family camping, Nike. That could just be Coca-Cola. That could just be McDonald's, Walmart. It's like you see all these commercials are like almost the same. It's like some family doing something fun. Nestea. It's like Citibank. It's like, well, how's that the product? You're not supposed to be thinking that. You just saw something you kind of liked. Boom, you saw an image. Hopefully that somewhere deep in your unconscious sticks a tiny bit. Elaboration likelihood model sounds boring, really fascinating, key to marketing. Recency effect, how like the last thing you hear in a list influences you more than the other things in that list. And it's a very interesting idea. If you actually, it's not just about that you're more likely to remember the last number in a list of numbers. It's that your brain seems to prioritize the things it was most recently exposed to. The idea of individuation, or how do you become an individual? And this links to the work of Carl Jung and the idea of identity formation, like how an identity forms, or evolutionary developmental psychology. We did like 1 slide on that, but that's a whole subfield. like looking at developmental psychology, but how evolution crafted that, right? How evolution is the why to the developmental psychology's what. You could look at Alport and his ideas around trait theory. Another interesting, like I'm not going to do huge rants on each of these, but these are all rabbit holes. You could look at Ash's conformity study, and I have a video about that on this site, right? That like Ash found that if you set someone up to an experiment where everyone else is actors and you have them all answer the wrong thing, it'll affect people and people start giving wrong answers, even if they know it. But then if you have other people break that trance and say, like, I don't think that's right, all of a sudden the person you're experimenting on becomes more likely to express themselves truthfully. Another super important idea. Don't say things you don't believe is the teaching from Ash's conformity study, because other people hear you and they think you believe it. The Hawthorne Effect. And this is an amazing idea, and this is one of the deepest psychology ideas. It's that every psychology study has an inherent limitation that people act differently when they're being studied. So if you're interested in that idea, look into the Hawthorne Effect. It's very interesting. The Good Samaritan experiment. Why don't more people help somebody in trouble? Right, the story of the Good Samaritan is a story from a biblical story that talks about like this guy that's hurt and all these people walking past him, and then somebody that's from like kind of the rival tribe walks past and actually helps the person that in the story you wouldn't think helps. And why don't people help each other? Cognitive dissonance, how saying you think something when you don't isn't cost free, right? And this is the Russian writers, especially Dostoevsky, and like the Crime and Punishment, a book all of you should read. Absolutely. Crime and Punishment. Like, is there any crimes that go unpunished? There's a crime in that book and the person seemingly gets away, but does he? Raskolnikov. And awesome book, kind of depressing book, but not at the end. It's like it's some of the Russian literature is very bleak, but it's very incredible depth. And then those top three on the right are a little bit more what I would consider like bioscience, anatomy related, like so motor cognition. Like you could go deep into this idea of how is our movement and our thinking connected? And it's connected at such an incredibly deep level. You're a social cognitive being, but you're not the computer screen. You're not in a box in the corner. You're in an embodied physical body that moves and does things. And what does that mean? What's joint attention, right? So we talked about this just in the last presentation or maybe two ago about this idea of like the child being able to now pay attention to the same thing as someone else and how that's key to cognitive development. You could give examples of that. You could show like an interesting experiment that shows that. You could talk about what attention is and what joint attention is and what that shows us about the growing child's mind and their ability to relate to the other. You could look at Vance's idea of the looking chamber. So again, all of these, I tried to like, some of them I just kind of have the concept and say for something like, well, almost all of these, I designed these all so that you could, yeah, so even something like magic number 7, where you might find like a million different things. So I have the name like George A. Miller. If you just throw magic number 7, George A. Miller. So I tried to like kind of give you the name in a way that's like search friendly. So yeah, I skipped a couple. Two-factor theory of Spearman. That's another fascinating psychodynamic concept or psychotherapeutic concept. Magic number 7, learned helplessness and enslavement. I talked about that with you in the experiments on dogs, and I used the example of the elephant. The halo effect, how we see people that we find as attractive as, well, as a whole bunch of things, right? As more competent, as more smart, as funnier, experiments on how attraction affects psychology, and then experiments on emotion. And that's like Singer's work primarily, but interesting ideas there. My point here is, though, that you're not limited to this list. If there's some other concept that like really fascinates you around psychology, just send me a quick email and be like, hey, Mike, I'm interested in doing this topic. And, you know, you students, I'll let you don't have to run it by me. If you have a cool idea that you think would be an interesting take, you can just do it. I don't want to set up this scenario where I have to pre-approve, but if you want to run something by me and be like, do you think this makes sense? I'll pre-approve in that sense. But if you're picking another idea, like say you wanted to pick Carl Jung's idea of the shadow and just do your project on that, I'm going to give you a green light on that. But this is at least a starting point for all of you. Okay, so I already kind of gave the assignment overview. Yeah, you can do this project individually or with one other, and I'll leave that to you. And again, it's like we have to be sort of adult with this idea that like I'm in Kitchener, you're in North Bay. I know not all of you, some of you are spread out around Ontario, which is so cool. But if you're gonna work with someone that is that that is gonna be an addition to the project. What is the psych? And you probably all are. I'm just saying, like I'm too far away to kind of monitor group performance. I'm going to take it as a given and you'll just get the same mark. So number one, I want you to kind of answer, and you'll notice these are sort of the same questions from the last one. These are like the 2 application activities. So you have like these 5 quizzes to kind of look at recall and to just sort of, it's not just that though, it's also to sort of, well, for you to demonstrate that you covered the material. And then this is like, okay, so you've covered the material, great. But can you like apply these ideas in a way that's interesting? And why should someone care about something like Piaget, or somebody like, why should we care about something like cognitive bias? Or I called it up there confirmation bias, which is just a type of cognitive bias. We live in the most cognitive biased social situation maybe of all time, right? It's like these ideas can help explain things. And I want you to take that idea, make an argument to me, the audience or reader, this concept has value in our modern times. Or for you as a modern student, what do you think the key contribution to psychology of this is? What contribution do you think this has to teach us about human psychology, especially in our modern times? So I say this modern times thing a couple times. How can you use the teaching to add value to your personal life? And I want to say with these questions, I'm trying to kind of set you up, right? So I'm asking for, I'm going to show in a second, but same as last time, you can either do a video or do a podcast, or some of you made recorded PowerPoints. I honestly can't wait to see all these. Some of you wrote what looked to be very solid papers. So like you can still do any of those options. I'd encourage you to try one of the more audio visuals if you're comfortable, but I've really enjoyed some of the papers Nipsing students have written too. Like I'm speaking more to last year's class just because I haven't marked yours yet. So in terms of these questions, it's like I would use these to outline and try to speak to these ideas. Like basically, why should we care about your topic? What's its key contribution? How does it sort of aid to us understanding this situation? And how can it have personal relevance to you? Say you're making a 10-minute video, that could be 2.5 minutes each. But again, say you don't fully, my rubric is like, I'm not necessarily like trying to burn you on each question and like nickel and dime you. And I think you'll see that with how I mark. I kind of am a big picture marker. Like if you do an awesome video and you only partially answer number 3, but the way that you put the video together is super solid, like I'm not going to ding marks just because it wasn't, like there's an over-reliance on rubrics sometimes. Perhaps we went too far with rubrics, but I do like rubrics, but they're not everything. It's like at a certain point, it's a human seeing another human's work. And I've been teaching long enough that I can tell a project that someone's put time into. And it's like, that's all I'm really asking you to do is take some time and try something cool. If you want to make a video, a recorded PowerPoint, you can record it right in PowerPoint through the recording function. If people need help with that, they can reach out, or you can just Google it. And it's like, or you can use Screencastify, you can record yourself doing a presentation in Zoom. I know with Blackboard, I think you have access to something called Canvas. I haven't really figured that out yet, but I think it's sort of Zoom-like, right? You could do it just with your phone. So there's a lot of different options. Yeah, so another score to 50. So again, I don't necessarily need to read this to you, but maybe I will just because I'm making this as a video. But this is going to be the same as the Giants of Psychology, that you can do a video, right? And this is the option I'm most flexible with, very open to being creative. You can make a reaction style video of you talking about some concept. I wouldn't, if you're playing a video though, like I just did that reaction video of the octopus one, I would say that's probably a little light for an assignment. Like don't just, the video should only be doing some of the lifting. I want you doing most of the lifting, but maybe you're doing sort of a reaction to some concept, or you show a clip of something, then you react to it. I don't want to make hard rules, but like, I just wanted this to be mainly like you expressing these ideas. You can make a kind of TED Talk style one. You can have just images and not you on the screen. Like you could make basically a PowerPoint slideshow and record yourself in it. But one of the options is you can turn off the camera, so it's just the audio. You could do that too, or you could record. You could download, like, I know Philips voice controller, Philips voice recorder, I think it's called, is a pretty good one on the Google App Store. I'm not really sure for Macs. I'm sure Macs have a recorder function nowadays. Everything does, right? So I'm not expecting perfection here. I honestly, I've had students that have like really tried and kind of like tried to go hard at it and then have like made mistakes and stuff. And it's like, trust me, I know that if you're new to this, there's going to be mistakes. You can get tongue tied a couple times, whatever. It's like, I want to see you dig in and try to apply these concepts and make the case to me that they're relevant. You can do an audio essay too. Like kind of podcast style. I think you know what I mean by all this. And then again, if you would prefer to do a more traditional approach, you can do an essay style answer. I'm asking for, yeah, like a minimum 6 pages, maximum 10 or 8, double spaced. Please turn it in, just kind of basic assignment style requirements. All right, so do I have the due date on this? I can't think of it off the top of my head. I'll put it with the video, all right, the due date, and it's on your schedule anyways, but I just wanted to make a video sort of going over this instead of just like emailing you the document. I wanted to email you the document with a link to the video that sort of explained it. So I know a lot of you might be thinking like, workshop 1's mark's not back yet, and you might want to see that feedback before you start part 2. And my request to you is to, okay, that's completely understandable. I totally get that. None of you have actually asked me that question yet, but I'm just sort of assuming you might think that. So my kind of case to you is how to best use your time is to start finding information and learning about your thing and start answering those questions. And then if you're, I think some of you might be a bit interested to hear what I think of how you did it. And so that's kind of the second part of the process anyway. So maybe just start the research part now. I'll try to get back to you on the first assignments as fast as I can. Thanks for being a good class. Take care of your loved ones and yourself. I don't know what to say here, and keep your stick on the ice in case they passed you. And thanks. You're an awesome class. Cheers.